So we're on high alert here at Hinterland Bees today on the Sunshine Coast because over the last few days we've had a cyclone tracking down the east coast of Australia. That's known as a hurricane if you're in the US. Getting a lot of questions about what I've been doing to prepare for such an event. We're looking at a Cat 2 cyclone, which means that wind speeds of potentially up to about 165 kilometres an hour, which makes our hives sort of vulnerable to blowing over or lids blowing off. So these are some of the things I'm doing to try and mitigate that. The first thing I'm doing is strapping all of our hives either together or at least getting hive straps around them. Now, this is a typical hive strap here. It's called an M-lock or a hive strap, which will go around the hive and hold it together even in the event of the hive falling over. If you can't get your hands on one of these, go for an off-the-shelf ratchet strap, something like this. Something with the ratcheting mechanism is much better than one that you just have to pull tighten. The thing is, if a hive does fall over and it is strapped together, chances are it will hold together as one. Right, so the other thing what I'm doing, or have been doing, and I've been doing it for the last 3 days, is going around to all of our apiary sites and pushing hives together if I can. Now, these hives are pretty well full of honey, so they're pretty heavy. They might be pushing 80 kilos each, so they're pretty solid, but nonetheless, as you can see, I've pushed the hives together here in this case and put the strap around both hives to increase their bulk. Come and I'll show you what you can do if you've just got a single hive and get some weight on top of that. Okay, here's an example of what you could do with the single hive situation. This one is quite heavy to start with, which is helpful, probably about 15-20 kilos. We could put a Besser block or a cinder block on top and actually strap it onto the box itself just to give it a lot more weight. So let me show you how these things work. Just going to feed that under the hive. Now, like this could actually go underneath the hive stand and strap it to the stand, but we're just going under the hive and over the top, and then our hive strap comes across here. The really good thing about these straps is that you can still ratchet them up like that, especially if you get the ones with a bit more length in. You can see that that is now really solid. You might notice I'm also using straps with this polywoven tape. Traditionally there's like a metal strapping that's used in these, but the metal strapping is pretty awkward to use, and the polywoven tape is nice and flexible and just as strong. I've had big hives fall over in the past, and I'm talking triples full of honey strapped together with the polywoven tape strapping, and they hold together. If you've got a flow hive, this is one of the ways that I'd really recommend looking at strapping it together. The problem with the flow hive is these gabled lids, and you can't get your strap very tight on those. So, because if you do, you'll break the edges off. So if you take the lid off, the gabled roof off, I don't actually have bees in this hive at the moment, so we're just using this as a demo. Use a hive strap or a ratchet strap to go around just like the other ones. Got that twisted, but anyway. You're just going to strap it together in there like that, and that's going to be nice and solid. held together. And then I'd use a second strap over the top of that, and you might even come in the opposite direction. So a second strap could go over and a little more loosely so that you don't break your gables, or the hive's actually stronger across that plane. So let's just do that as a demonstration. So that strap's going right down the rib of the gabled roof. That's at its strongest point, and then that's going to be held on there. So the other big issue with cyclones and hurricanes, of course, is the rain, and we're likely to cop 10 to 20 inches of rain here over the next few days, which means that any hives that might be out in a flood-prone area need immediate attention. We're lucky that I don't think any of our apiary sites are likely to flood, but if yours are, then and you can't move the hives, here's a couple of things that you might consider doing. Obviously, getting them as high off the ground as possible is a no-brainer, but if you've got flood water that does come up into the front entrance of your hive, your bees have got nowhere to go. They can't escape unless you get a top entrance in. A really simple way of putting a top entrance in your hive is just to get a little stick or something and shove it in the top there, just to prop your hive open at the top. That way, any flood water that comes up, the bees can escape. They'll get themselves out, and you might be able to save your bees, even though you probably lose your brood nest down there. Now, if you've got honey supers on and you've got a queen excluder in, now's probably the time to pull your queen excluder out, because there's not much point all your bees escaping to safety and your queen dying down in your brood box. It's going to be a bit of a pain in the neck afterwards, because you'll have to delve back in, find the queen, get her down in the bottom box, but you might at least be able to save those bees, the queen and some of your hive. And of course, getting as much weight on top of your hive as possible will potentially stop it washing away. So one other issue that you might face with wind-driven rain, particularly when it starts coming in almost horizontal, is water getting inside your hive through the front entrance. Now, it's not a big issue if you've got vented bottom boards like we have, but if you've got solid bottom boards, the water's got nowhere to go. So you really want to do one of two things. You want to try and shut down your entrance as much as possible. You know, if it's pouring with rain, you only need like a 2-finger gap for the bees to be able to get in and out if they need to. That'll stop a lot of wind-driven rain. You also want to make sure that you can tilt your hive forward. So you might just get something in under there, and don't worry too much if it's on a pretty extreme tilt. You want to just make sure that it's on such an angle that any wind-driven rain that does get in there does have the ability to drain out. So I guess the last thing you could consider doing is getting some star pickets or posts driven into the ground next to the hive and strapping them down that way as well. I think your first thing to do is make sure you've got a hive strap around the whole unit, so if it does fall over in any circumstance, it's not necessarily going to break apart. A couple of things that you might want to consider is get yourself a kit together now in case of, you know, a disaster. You want to make sure it's pretty obvious to say that you want your beekeeping suit and veil and protective gloves and equipment, because if a hive does fall over, you're going to have to go and deal with it. The other thing is obviously you want your smoker at hand, and one thing to remember, get some dry smoker fuel now, because you don't want to go looking for dry fuel once the rain hits. I'll put all this information down in the video description. You'll find this video on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So if you're not subscribed or following on any of those platforms at the moment, hop over there and have a look. You might consider subscribing to the channels. So all we can do now is hope for the best and deal with the aftermath. So for those Queensland and northern New South Wales beekeepers that are going to face this challenge over the next few days, best of luck. I hope it all fizzes out before it gets too bad. We'll catch you soon.